Marcus Johnson had been driving for nearly 8 hours straight, the highway stretching endlessly before him like a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the darkness. His eyes were heavy, his back ached from sitting in the same position, and all he wanted was to reach his mother's house before midnight. She had called him 3 days ago, her voice trembling on the phone, telling him that his younger brother David was in trouble again. This time it was serious. David had gotten mixed up with the wrong crowd, and the family needed Marcus home to help straighten things out. The small town of Millbrook wasn't even on most maps. It was one of those forgotten places that time seemed to have passed by, where the same families had lived for generations, and strangers were noticed immediately. Marcus had grown up in a town just like it, 2 states over, and he knew exactly what to expect. Small towns had their charm, but they also had their problems. He had joined the Marines at 18, partly to serve his country, but also to escape the suffocating atmosphere of small-town life where opportunities were few and prejudices ran deep. Now, at 32, Marcus was a decorated Marine Corps sergeant. He had served 3 tours overseas, led men through impossible situations, and earned the respect of everyone who served alongside him. The silver Marine Corps badge on his uniform wasn't just a piece of metal. It represented years of sacrifice, discipline, and unwavering dedication to protecting the freedoms of people who would never know his name. But tonight he wasn't wearing his uniform. He was just another black man driving through a small town in the middle of nowhere, wearing jeans and a plain black t-shirt. The gas gauge had been hovering near empty for the last 20 miles, and Marcus finally spotted a dimly lit gas station ahead. He pulled off the highway, the fluorescent lights flickering above the pumps as moths circled frantically around them. The place looked run down, with peeling paint on the walls and weeds growing through cracks in the concrete. An old man sat behind the counter inside, barely visible through the grimy windows. Marcus filled up his tank, paid in cash, and was about to get back on the road when he noticed his back left tire looked a bit low. He sighed. The last thing he needed was a flat tire in the middle of the night. He pulled around to the side of the station where there was more light and got out to check the tire pressure. As he knelt down, he heard the crunch of gravel behind him. 2 police cruisers had pulled into the lot, their headlights flooding the area with harsh white light. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He had done nothing wrong, but experience had taught him that innocence didn't always matter when you were a black man in the wrong place. The car doors opened, and 2 officers stepped out. The first one was tall and heavy-set, with a thick mustache and cold blue eyes that seemed to assess Marcus as a threat before even speaking a word. His name tag read Dawson. The second officer was younger, maybe in his late 20s, with a nervous energy about him. He kept his hand resting on his belt, close to his weapon. His name tag said Miller. "Evening," Officer Dawson said, his voice flat and emotionless. "You got some reason to be lurking around here at this time of night?" Marcus stood up slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Just checking my tire, officer. I'm passing through on my way to see my mother." Dawson's eyes narrowed. "License and registration, now." There was something in the way he said it, an edge of hostility that made Marcus's jaw clench. But he had been through this before. He knew the drill. Stay calm, stay polite, don't give them any reason to escalate. He reached slowly into his back pocket for his wallet, moving deliberately so there would be no misunderstanding about what he was doing. "I'm reaching for my wallet," Marcus said clearly, making sure both officers could see his movements. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Miller barked, his hand now gripping his weapon. Marcus handed over his license and the rental car registration. Dawson took them and walked back to his cruiser, leaving Miller standing watch. The younger officer's eyes never left Marcus, scanning him up and down as if searching for some hidden threat. The silence was thick and uncomfortable, broken only by the buzzing of the fluorescent lights overhead. Minutes passed. Marcus could see Dawson in the cruiser, talking on his radio, but it shouldn't have taken this long to run a simple license check. His record was clean. He had never even gotten a speeding ticket, but he knew what was happening. They were making him wait, asserting their authority, letting him know who was in control. Finally, Dawson got out of the car and walked back over, but he didn't return the license. Instead, he crossed his arms and stared at Marcus with open suspicion. "So, Marcus Johnson from Virginia, what brings you all the way out here to Millbrook?" "Like I said, I'm visiting my mother. She lives about 40 miles from here." "At midnight?" That's a strange time for a family visit. It's an emergency. My brother is having some trouble and she asked me to come help. Dawson exchanged a look with Miller. What kind of trouble? Marcus felt anger beginning to simmer beneath his careful composure. Personal family business. Nothing illegal. We'll decide what's illegal around here, Dawson said, stepping closer. You got a lot of attitude for someone in your position. Maybe you don't understand how things work in this town. We don't take kindly to strangers rolling through here in the middle of the night, especially ones who look like they might be up to no good. The words hung in the air like poison. Marcus felt his hands ball into fists at his sides, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. He had faced enemy combatants in hostile territory, had kept his cool under fire when men were dying around him. He could handle two small-town cops with big egos and small minds. I'm not up to anything, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. I'm just trying to get to my mother's house. Pop the trunk, Dawson ordered. What? Why, because I told you to. You refusing to comply with a lawful order? Marcus knew he had rights. He knew they had no probable cause to search his vehicle, but he also knew that asserting those rights could make things worse. In situations like this, being right didn't always keep you safe. Still, something inside him refused to back down completely. Officer, I haven't done anything wrong. I've been polite and cooperative. There's no reason to search my vehicle. Dawson's face reddened. Boy, you better watch your tone with me. I don't care where you think you're from or what you think you know about the law. Out here I am the law. Now open that trunk or I'll have you in handcuffs faster than you can blink. The word boy cut through Marcus like a blade. He had heard it before, too many times. Always delivered with the same contempt, the same intent to diminish and demean. His mind flashed to the young Marines he had led, some of them barely out of high school who had trusted him with their lives. He thought about the flag-draped coffins he had saluted, the brothers he had lost in service to a country that still saw him as less than human in places like this. Miller had drawn his weapon now, pointing it at Marcus. Hands on the vehicle! Do it now. Everything was happening too fast. One moment Marcus had been checking his tire, and now he had a gun pointed at him for no reason other than the color of his skin, and these officers barely concealed racism. His heart was pounding, but he kept his voice calm. I'm not resisting, Marcus said, placing his hands on the hood of the car. I'm complying. There's no need for weapons. Dawson grabbed Marcus's arm roughly, twisting it behind his back. We'll decide what's necessary. You're under arrest for obstruction and suspicion of criminal activity. Suspicion of what? I haven't done anything. Shut your mouth, Dawson growled, pulling out his handcuffs. This was it. This was the moment that could change everything. Marcus had seen videos of encounters like this that ended in tragedy. He had read the names of men who had done nothing wrong but ended up dead anyway, because of trigger-happy cops and systemic racism. He thought about his mother, waiting for him to arrive safely. He thought about David, who needed him. He thought about all the young Marines who looked up to him as an example of strength and integrity. And then, in that moment of crisis, Marcus remembered something. His Marine Corps badge. It was in his wallet, tucked behind his driver's license. Not the ceremonial one he wore on his uniform, but the identification card that marked him as an active-duty United States Marine. Officer Dawson stared at the Marine Corps identification card for what felt like an eternity. The younger officer, Miller, shifted nervously, clearly confused about why his partner had suddenly frozen. The gun in Miller's hand wavered slightly, but it was still pointed in Marcus's general direction, a reminder that the danger hadn't passed. What is it? Miller asked, his voice tight with tension. Dawson didn't answer immediately. He turned the ID over in his hands, examining it from every angle as if trying to find proof that it was fake. But there was no faking the official Department of Defense seal, the holographic security features, or the active duty status clearly printed on the card. Marcus Johnson wasn't just some random black man driving through their town. He was a United States Marine Corps sergeant with 3 combat deployments and a record of decorated service. Marcus remained still, his hands pressed against the hood of the rental car, but his mind was racing. He had seen this before, this moment of hesitation when people who thought they knew exactly who he was suddenly had to recalibrate. The Marine Corps carried weight, even in small towns where prejudice ran deep. It represented something that transcended race, at least in theory: service, sacrifice, brotherhood. The question was whether these 2 officers would let that reality change their behavior, or whether their racism was so deeply rooted that even proof of his military service wouldn't matter. "He's military," Dawson finally said, his voice stripped of its earlier aggression. He sounded almost uncertain now, like a man who had just realized he might have made a serious mistake. Miller lowered his weapon slightly but didn't holster it. "So, that doesn't mean he's not up to something." Dawson shot him a sharp look. "He's a Marine sergeant. Active duty. 3 deployments." He paused, and Marcus could hear the unspoken calculation happening in the officer's mind. If this went wrong, if they arrested an active-duty Marine who had done nothing illegal, there would be consequences. The military took care of its own, and wrongful arrests of service members had a way of making headlines. "I told you I wasn't doing anything wrong," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I'm just trying to get to my mother's house. That's all I've ever been trying to do." Dawson walked around to face Marcus, the ID still in his hand. Up close, Marcus could see the conflict playing out on the officer's face. This wasn't how he had expected the night to go. He had pulled over what he assumed was just another suspicious black man, someone he could intimidate and send on his way, or maybe arrest on some trumped-up charge. But now the situation had changed, and Dawson was clearly trying to figure out how to save face without admitting he had been wrong. "You should have told us you were military right away," Dawson said, attempting to shift the blame. Marcus felt anger flare hot in his chest. "I shouldn't have to prove my worth to avoid being harassed by police. I told you exactly what I was doing. I was cooperative from the start. You're the ones who escalated this for no reason." "Watch your tone," Dawson warned, but there was less conviction in his voice now. "No," Marcus said, straightening up and meeting Dawson's eyes directly. "I've watched my tone. I've been respectful. I've done everything right, and you still treated me like a criminal. You pulled a gun on me for checking my tire. You were about to arrest me for absolutely nothing, and the only reason you're hesitating now is because of that ID card. But I'm not a Marine right now. I'm just a citizen, and I have the same rights as anyone else, whether I'm wearing a uniform or not." The words came out with more force than Marcus had intended. Years of frustration and anger pouring out in a single moment. How many times had he and his fellow black service members talked about this exact scenario? How many conversations had they had about the cruel irony of fighting for a country that didn't always fight for them? He had friends who had been harassed by police despite their military service, men who had worn the uniform with pride only to be treated as threats when they came home. Miller stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "You need to calm down and show some respect." "Respect?" Marcus's voice rose. "I've shown nothing but respect. I've served this country for 14 years. I've led men in combat. I've lost brothers overseas defending the freedoms that you two are violating right now. And you want to talk to me about respect?" Dawson raised a hand, stopping Miller before he could respond. The older officer's expression had shifted again, and now he just looked tired. Tired and maybe, just maybe, a little ashamed. "Look," he said, his voice softer now. "We're just doing our jobs. There's been a lot of crime in this area lately. Cars getting stolen, break-ins. We have to check out anything suspicious. And I'm suspicious because I'm black," Marcus said flatly. It wasn't a question. Dawson didn't answer, which was answer enough. Marcus shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "You know what's funny? When I'm overseas wearing my uniform, people see me as a hero. They see an American soldier, and that's all that matters. But here, in the country I'm supposed to be protecting, I'm just another black man who doesn't belong. I can't even check my tire at a gas station without having guns drawn on me." The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. Miller looked away, unable to meet Marcus's gaze. Even Dawson seemed at a loss for words. The truth of what Marcus had said hung in the air between them, undeniable and damning. Finally, Dawson handed back Marcus's license and the Marine Corps ID. "You're free to go," he said quietly. Just like that, Marcus took his documents, his hand shaking slightly from the adrenaline and emotion. "No apology? No acknowledgement that you were wrong?" "I said you're free to go," Dawson repeated, his voice hardening again. "Don't push it." Marcus wanted to push it. He wanted to demand an apology, wanted to file a complaint, wanted to make sure these two officers faced consequences for their actions. But he was also exhausted, still hours away from his mother's house, and knew that prolonging this encounter wouldn't change anything. Small-town cops protected their own. and the system rarely held them accountable, especially when their victims were black. "Fine," Marcus said, walking back to his car door. "But I want your badge numbers. Both of you." "What for?" Miller asked suspiciously. "Because I'm still a Marine and I still believe in accountability. I'm going to file a report about what happened here tonight. Maybe nothing will come of it, but at least there will be a record. The next person you pull over for no reason might not be as lucky as me. They might not have an ID card that makes you think twice about violating their rights." Dawson's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He recited his badge number, and after a moment's hesitation, Miller did the same. Marcus wrote them down in his phone, along with the time, location, and a brief description of what had transpired. He could see the officers watching him, their earlier aggression replaced by wariness. They knew he was right. They knew they had profiled him, had treated him as guilty until proven innocent, and only his military service had saved him from a potentially much worse outcome. As Marcus got into his car and started the engine, Dawson walked over to the driver's side window. Marcus rolled it down partway, keeping his guard up. "For what it's worth," Dawson said, not quite meeting Marcus's eyes. "Thank you for your service." Marcus stared at him for a long moment. The words should have meant something. They were the phrase Americans use to honor veterans, a simple acknowledgement of sacrifice and duty. But coming from this man after everything that had just happened, they felt hollow and meaningless. "If you really want to thank me," Marcus said, his voice cold, "then treat the next black person you encounter like a human being. Treat them the way you'd want your own family to be treated. That's how you thank veterans like me, not with words, but with actions." He rolled up the window and pulled out of the gas station parking lot, leaving the two officers standing in the harsh fluorescent light. As he drove back onto the highway, his hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His whole body was shaking now, the delayed reaction setting in as the immediate danger passed. Marcus had to pull over after a few miles, unable to drive safely as emotion overwhelmed him. He sat on the side of the dark highway, his head resting on the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. He thought about all the times he had told himself that his service mattered, that wearing the uniform meant something. And it did mean something, but tonight had been a brutal reminder that for some people, his skin color would always matter more than his service record. He thought about the young black Marines he mentored, the ones who looked up to him as an example of what was possible. What was he supposed to tell them now? That even after years of dedicated service, even after earning their country's respect on the battlefield, they would still be seen as threats in their own communities, that the uniform that represented their greatest accomplishments would mean nothing when they took it off. Marcus pulled out his phone and called his mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with worry. "Marcus, where are you? I thought you'd be here by now." "I'm okay, Mom," he said, though his voice betrayed him. "I'm about an hour away. Just had to make a stop." "What happened?" "You sound upset," he almost told her. Almost described the whole encounter, the guns drawn for no reason, the casual racism disguised as law enforcement. But then he remembered why he was driving through the night in the first place. His mother was already worried about David. She didn't need another reason to fear for her son's safety. "Just tired from the drive," Marcus lied. "I'll tell you about it when I get there." "How's David?" His mother sighed, scared. "He knows he messed up this time. He needs to hear from you, Marcus. He needs to see that there's a better way." Marcus closed his eyes, thinking about his younger brother. David had always been the rebellious one, the kid who pushed boundaries and questioned authority. Growing up black in America meant learning to navigate a system that wasn't built for you, and everyone found their own way to cope. Marcus had chosen structure and discipline, joining the military to escape and to prove himself. David had gone in the opposite direction, rejecting the rules he saw as unfair and arbitrary. But tonight, Marcus had been reminded that even his path didn't guarantee safety or respect. Even following all the rules, being polite and compliant, serving his country with distinction hadn't protected him from being treated as a criminal. What message was he supposed to give David now? "I'll talk to him," Marcus promised his mother. "I'm getting back on the road now. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. Drive safe." Marcus ended the call and took a deep breath, trying to center himself. The encounter with Dawson and Miller had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. But he couldn't let it derail him. His family needed him, and he had already come too far to turn back now. As he pulled back onto the highway, Marcus made a decision. He would file that report, would make sure there was an official record of what had happened, but he would also use this experience to fuel something positive. He would talk to David about it, help his brother understand that the anger and frustration they both felt was valid, but that giving into it would only make things worse. He would mentor more young Black Marines, prepare them for the reality they would face when they came home. And he would keep serving, keep fighting, because that's what Marines did. The road ahead was dark and long, but Marcus drove forward anyway, carrying the weight of everything that had just happened and everything that still needed to be done. He was a Marine, and Marines didn't quit. Not when things got hard, and not when the mission wasn't complete. The badge that had saved him tonight was proof of his service, but it was also a reminder of an uncomfortable truth. He shouldn't have needed it to be treated with basic human dignity. Someday, maybe, that would change, but until then he would keep driving, keep fighting, keep believing that the country he served could eventually live up to the ideals it claimed to represent. The lights of another small town appeared on the horizon, and Marcus felt his stomach tighten with familiar anxiety. But he kept driving. There was nowhere else to go but forward. Marcus pulled into his mother's driveway just after 1 a.m. The small house looked exactly as he remembered it, with the porch light glowing warmly and flower pots lining the walkway despite the late season. His mother had always taken pride in her home, keeping it neat and welcoming even when times were hard. The sight of it made something inside Marcus's chest loosen slightly, a reminder that there were still places in the world where he was safe and valued. Before he could even turn off the engine, the front door opened and his mother appeared, wrapped in her bathrobe, her face etched with worry. Gloria Johnson was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she had raised 2 boys on her own after their father died, and there was a strength in her that belied her gentle appearance. She had worked 2 jobs for most of Marcus's childhood, making sure her sons had food on the table and clean clothes, sacrificing everything so they might have better opportunities than she'd had. Marcus got out of the car and was immediately wrapped in his mother's embrace. She held him tight, the way she used to when he was a child and had scraped his knee or gotten his feelings hurt at school. For a moment, Marcus let himself be that child again, let himself feel the comfort of his mother's arms and forget about racist cops and guns drawn for no reason. "I'm so glad you're here," Gloria whispered, pulling back to look at her oldest son. Her eyes searched his face, and Marcus knew she could see that something was wrong. Mothers always knew. "What took you so long? You should have been here an hour ago." Marcus hesitated, not wanting to burden her with what had happened, but he also knew she would see through any lie he told. "Had a run-in with some local police at a gas station," he admitted. "Nothing serious. They were just being difficult." Gloria's expression darkened. "They gave you trouble?" "It's handled, Mom, really. I don't want to talk about it right now." He changed the subject quickly. "Where's David?" His mother sighed, the worry lines around her eyes deepening. "In his room. He won't come out, won't talk to me. He's been like this since yesterday when I told him you were coming. I think he's ashamed." "He should be," Marcus said more harshly than he intended. "He's 23 years old. He should know better than to get mixed up with criminals." "He's your brother," Gloria reminded him gently. "He's made mistakes, but he's not a bad person. He's just lost, Marcus. He needs guidance, not judgment." Marcus felt a pang of guilt. His mother was right, of course. David wasn't a bad kid. He was just struggling to find his place in a world that seemed designed to make that as difficult as possible for young Black men. Not everyone could join the military or wanted to. Not everyone could escape the circumstances of their birth through discipline and structure. Some people needed a different kind of help, a different kind of example. "I know," Marcus said softly. "I'll talk to him. But first, tell me what happened. What kind of trouble is he in?" Gloria led him inside, and they sat at the kitchen table where they had shared countless meals and conversations over the years. The house smelled like the cinnamon tea his mother always drank before bed, a comforting scent that brought back memories of simpler times. She poured him a cup and began to explain. David had fallen in with a group of guys from the neighborhood, young men with no jobs and no prospects who spent their time looking for easy money. They had started small, selling stolen goods, but things had escalated. Last week, one of David's friends had been arrested for armed robbery. The police had found messages on his phone that implicated several others in the group, including David. So far, David hadn't been charged with anything, But the police had questioned him twice, and Gloria feared it was only a matter of time before they came back with a warrant. "He swears he wasn't involved in the robbery," Gloria said, her hands wrapped around her teacup for warmth. "He says he was with those boys, but he didn't know what they were planning. When they went into that store, he stayed in the car. He didn't know they had guns. But he was there," Marcus said heavily. "He drove them. That makes him an accessory. He's scared, Marcus. He knows he made a mistake. He needs help, not prison." Marcus rubbed his face with both hands, exhaustion and frustration weighing on him. This was exactly the kind of situation he had hoped David would avoid. Growing up, Marcus had always been the responsible one, the one who followed the rules and stayed out of trouble. David had been different, more impulsive and rebellious. When Marcus joined the Marines, he had hoped his example would inspire his younger brother to make better choices. Instead, the distance between them had grown, and David had drifted into exactly the kind of life that Marcus had worked so hard to escape. "I'll talk to him," Marcus said again. "But Mom, I can't make this go away. If he was involved even peripherally, there could be consequences. The best thing he can do now is cooperate with the police, tell them everything he knows and hope they're willing to work with him." "He doesn't trust the police," Gloria said quietly. "After what happened to Marcus Brown last year, after what's been happening all over the country, can you blame him?" Marcus couldn't. Marcus Brown had been a teenager in a neighboring town, killed during a traffic stop that had gone wrong. The officers involved had claimed he reached for something, but witnesses said he had done nothing threatening. The case had gone nowhere. The officers cleared of wrongdoing, and another family left to bury their child and wonder why justice seemed to only flow one direction. "I don't trust them either," Marcus admitted, thinking about what had happened to him just hours earlier. But David doesn't have a lot of options. If he runs or refuses to cooperate, it'll just make things worse. They talked for a while longer, Gloria filling him in on the details of David's situation, and Marcus trying to formulate a plan. Finally, exhausted and emotionally drained, Marcus headed upstairs to the bedroom he had once shared with his brother. The house had only 2 bedrooms, so the boys had grown up sharing a space, sleeping in bunk beds until Marcus joined the military and David got the room to himself. Marcus paused outside David's door, gathering his thoughts. He could hear music playing softly inside, some rap song about struggle and survival in the streets. He knocked gently. "Go away, Mom," David's voice called out. "It's not Mom," Marcus replied. "It's me. Can I come in?" There was a long pause, then the sound of movement. The door opened, and David stood there looking both defiant and vulnerable. He had grown since Marcus last saw him, taller and more filled out, but his eyes had the same uncertainty they'd had when he was a boy. "You didn't have to come all this way," David said, stepping back to let Marcus into the room. "I know you're busy with your important military career." The sarcasm stung, but Marcus let it pass. He looked around the room, noting the posters on the walls and the clutter of clothes and electronics. It looked like any young man's room, full of the artifacts of someone trying to figure out who they were and where they belonged in the world. "Mom called me," Marcus said, sitting on the edge of David's bed. "She's worried about you." "I'm worried about you," David snorted, dropping into his desk chair and spinning it to face his brother. "Yes, well, you don't need to be. I can handle my own problems. By getting involved with criminals? By being an accessory to armed robbery? That's how you handle things?" "I didn't rob anyone," David shot back, anger flashing in his eyes. "I didn't even know what they were planning. I thought we were just hanging out. But you were there. You were in the car. And now the police think you were involved. Which means you could end up in prison even though you didn't actually do anything. That's the reality of the situation, David. Fair or not, that's what you're facing." David's anger deflated slightly, replaced by fear. "I know," he said quietly. "I know I messed up. But what am I supposed to do? If I tell the police what I know, I'm a snitch. Those guys will come after me. If I don't cooperate, I might go to jail for something I didn't do. Either way, I'm screwed." Marcus leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Tell me exactly what happened that night, everything." David hesitated, then began to talk. He described how he'd been hanging out with the group, just trying to fit in and feel like he belonged somewhere. They had been driving around, smoking and talking, when one of them suggested hitting up a convenience store. David said he thought they were just going to buy beer or maybe shoplift some snacks. It It wasn't until they pulled into the parking lot and two of the guys pulled out guns that he realized what was actually happening. "I told them I didn't want any part of it," David said, his voice breaking slightly. "I told them to let me out of the car, but they said if I bailed, they'd consider me a rat. They said I was already involved just by being there, so I might as well stay quiet and collect my share. I was scared, Marcus. I didn't know what to do. So you stayed in the car?" "I stayed in the car," David confirmed, shame evident in his voice. "I didn't go inside. I didn't touch the money. But I was there, and the police know it because there's surveillance footage of the vehicle and someone identified me as being one of the guys hanging around that group." Marcus closed his eyes, trying to think through the situation strategically. In the military, he was used to dealing with complex problems that required careful planning and execution. But this was different. This was his little brother, and the stakes were his freedom and future. "You need to talk to the police," Marcus said finally. "You need to tell them exactly what you told me. Yes, you were there, but you didn't know what was going to happen and you didn't participate. You cooperate fully, give them names if you have to, and hope that they see you as a witness rather than an accomplice." "Those guys will kill me if I rat them out," David said, genuine fear in his voice now. "And you'll kill yourself if you don't," Marcus countered. "Maybe not literally, but you'll destroy your future. Is that what you want? To end up in prison? To have a record that follows you around for the rest of your life? To prove everyone right who said you wouldn't amount to anything?" David flinched at the harsh words. "That's not fair." "Life isn't fair," Marcus said, his voice softening slightly. "Trust me, I learned that lesson tonight. But we still have to deal with reality. And the reality is that you made some bad choices, and now you have to face the consequences. The only question is whether you face them head-on or let them destroy you." They talked late into the night, Marcus sharing some of his own experiences and the lessons he had learned through his military service. He told David about the Marines he had served with, many of them young men from similar backgrounds who had joined the military looking for structure and purpose. He talked about leadership and responsibility, about making hard choices when there were no good options, and finally, carefully, he told David about what had happened at the gas station, about how he had been profiled and threatened by police officers who saw him as a criminal, before they saw him as a human being, about how his Marine Corps badge had been the only thing that saved him from a potentially much worse encounter. "That's exactly why I don't trust the police," David said when Marcus finished. "You're a decorated veteran, and they still treated you like a thug. What chance do I have?" "You have the chance to tell the truth," Marcus replied. "You have the chance to take responsibility for your part in what happened and hope that someone in the system will recognize that you deserve a second chance. It's not a guarantee, David. Nothing in life is guaranteed, especially for people who look like us. But it's the only option you have that doesn't end with you in prison or on the run." David was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. Finally, he looked up at his brother, tears glistening in his eyes. "I'm scared, Marcus." "I know," Marcus said, reaching out to grip David's shoulder. "I'm scared too. But we're going to figure this out together. You're not alone in this. You've got Mom, you've got me, and we're going to do everything we can to help you. But you have to help yourself too. You have to make the right choice, even though it's the hard choice." David nodded slowly, wiping at his eyes. "Okay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll talk to the police, but you have to be there with me. I can't do this alone." "I'll be there," Marcus promised, every step of the way. They sat together in the small bedroom, two brothers bound by blood and circumstance, trying to navigate a world that seemed determined to make things as difficult as possible. Outside, the night was quiet, the small town sleeping peacefully, unaware of the struggles happening behind closed doors. Marcus thought about the encounter at the gas station, about Officers Dawson and Miller, about the Marine Corps badge that had changed everything. He thought about the young black men he mentored, the ones who looked up to him as proof that success was possible despite the obstacles. And he thought about David sitting across from him, scared and vulnerable and desperately in need of guidance. This was why he had joined the Marines, Marcus realized. Not just to serve his country or to prove himself, but to be the kind of person who could make a difference. To be someone his brother could look up to, someone who could help guide others through the darkness. The badge had saved him tonight, but it was what the badge represented that truly mattered. Service, honor, and the commitment to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. Tomorrow, they would face the police together. Tomorrow, David would begin the difficult process of taking responsibility for his mistakes and fighting for a second chance. But tonight, in this small bedroom in this small house, two brothers reconnected, bound by love and the shared determination to overcome the obstacles that life placed in their path. Marcus stayed with David until his younger brother finally fell asleep, exhausted by emotion and worry. Then he returned to his own temporary room, lying awake in the darkness, thinking about everything that had happened and everything that still needed to be done. The road ahead was uncertain and difficult, but Marcus was a Marine. He didn't back down from challenges, and he wouldn't let his brother face this alone. The morning sun streamed through the window of the local police station, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Marcus sat beside David in the waiting area, his hand resting reassuringly on his brother's shoulder. David's leg bounced nervously, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Gloria sat on David's other side, her face drawn with worry, clutching her purse tightly in her lap. They had called ahead, letting the detective in charge of the robbery case know that David wanted to come in voluntarily to make a statement. Marcus hoped this would work in his brother's favor, showing that David was taking responsibility and cooperating with the investigation. But he also knew that the criminal justice system was unpredictable, especially for young black men, and there were no guarantees about how this would turn out. David Johnson, a tall black woman in a detective's badge, appeared in the doorway leading to the back offices. She was probably in her mid-40s with natural hair pulled back in a neat bun and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her name tag read Detective Patricia Williams. David stood up shakily and Marcus rose with him. "I'm David. This is my brother Marcus and my mother Gloria." Detective Williams shook hands with each of them, her grip firm and professional. Marcus noticed the way her eyes lingered on him for just a moment, taking in his bearing and demeanor. He was wearing civilian clothes, but years of military service had given him a certain posture and presence that people often recognized even when he wasn't in uniform. "Thank you for coming in voluntarily," Detective Williams said, her voice neutral but not unkind. "That's a good first step. David, I'll need to speak with you privately, but your family can wait here. This shouldn't take too long." "Can my brother come with me?" David asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Please. I need him there." The detective considered this for a moment. "Normally we prefer to conduct interviews one-on-one, but since you're here voluntarily and you're not under arrest, I'll allow it. But understand that your brother can't speak for you or interfere with the interview." "I understand," Marcus said. "I'm just here to support him." They followed Detective Williams down a corridor lined with offices and interview rooms. The walls were painted a depressing shade of beige, and the fluorescent lights hummed overhead with a frequency that set Marcus's teeth on edge. Everything about the place was designed to be intimidating, to make people feel small and powerless. He had seen similar tactics used in interrogations overseas, and he recognized them for what they were. The interview room was small and windowless, with a table bolted to the floor and 3 chairs arranged around it. A camera was mounted in one corner, its red light indicating it was recording. Detective Williams gestured for David and Marcus to sit, then took her own seat across from them. She placed a digital recorder on the table and stated the date, time, and names of everyone present for the record. "David, before we begin, I need to inform you of your rights," she said, pulling out a card and reading from it. The familiar Miranda warning filled the small room, each word heavy with legal significance. "Do you understand these rights as I've explained them to you?" "Yes," David said quietly. "And you're willing to speak with me voluntarily, knowing that anything you say can be used in court?" David glanced at Marcus, who gave him an encouraging nod. "Yes, I want to tell you what happened. I want to tell the truth." Detective Williams leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "All right then. Let's start from the beginning. Tell me about your relationship with Marcus Brown, Jerome Davis, and Kyle Richardson." David took a deep breath and began to talk. He explained how he had known these guys from the neighborhood, how they had been friends in high school, how they had stayed in touch over the years, even as their paths diverged. Marcus Brown had dropped out of school and started dealing drugs. Jerome Davis had done a stint in juvenile detention for theft. Kyle Richardson had bounced between jobs, never able to keep any of them for long. David admitted that he had known they were involved in illegal activities, But he had convinced himself that just hanging out with them didn't make him a criminal too. I wanted to fit in, David said, his voice thick with emotion. I wanted to feel like I belonged somewhere. Marcus was always the successful one, the one who did everything right. I felt like I could never measure up to him, so I stopped trying. And these guys, they didn't judge me. They didn't care that I didn't have a fancy career or that I was still living with my mom. They just accepted me. Detective Williams listened without interruption, taking notes occasionally. Her face remained neutral, giving nothing away about what she was thinking. Marcus watched her carefully, trying to gauge whether she was sympathetic to David's situation or simply gathering evidence to use against him. David continued his story, describing the night of the robbery in detail. He explained how they had been driving around, how the conversation had turned to money, and how easy it would be to hit a convenience store. He described his growing discomfort as he realized what they were planning, his failed attempt to talk them out of it, and his fear when they told him he was already implicated just by being in the car. I should have gotten out, David said, tears starting to flow now. I should have called the police or walked away or done something. But I was scared. I was scared they would hurt me, and I was scared of being called a snitch, and I was scared. So I stayed in the car. I didn't go inside. I didn't touch any of the money. But I was there, and I know that makes me guilty of something. I know I was wrong. The confession hung in the air of the small room. Detective Williams studied David for a long moment, then glanced at Marcus. You're his brother? Yes, Marcus replied. And what do you do? Marcus hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. I'm a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. I've been in for 14 years. Something shifted in Detective Williams's expression. It wasn't quite respect, but it was acknowledgement. That's a long time. Combat deployments? 3. Iraq and Afghanistan. She nodded slowly, then turned back to David. Your brother has built a successful career through discipline and service. What have you been doing with your life? The question was blunt and harsh, and David flinched. But Marcus was glad she had asked it. David needed to confront the reality of the choices he had made and the opportunities he had wasted. Nothing, David admitted. I've been doing nothing. Working dead-end jobs, hanging out with people who are going nowhere, feeling sorry for myself. I've been wasting my life. Why? Detective Williams asked. What stopped you from making better choices? David was quiet for a moment, thinking. I don't know, he said finally. Maybe I was scared of trying and failing. Maybe I felt like the system was rigged against me anyway, so why bother? Maybe I was just being stupid and selfish. Probably all of those things. The system is rigged in a lot of ways, Detective Williams said, surprising both Marcus and David with her candor. I'm not going to lie to you about that. Being a young black man in this country comes with challenges that other people don't face. But that doesn't mean you give up. That doesn't mean you throw your life away by making stupid decisions and hanging out with criminals. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on David's. I became a cop because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be part of the solution instead of complaining about the problem. It hasn't been easy. I've dealt with racism from colleagues. I've dealt with distrust from my own community. And I've had to work twice as hard as everyone else just to be taken seriously. But I kept going because I knew that giving up would only make things worse. Marcus felt a surge of respect for this woman. She understood the struggle, the constant battle to prove yourself in a world that was too quick to judge based on skin color rather than character, and she was using her position to try to help David, even though she could have simply arrested him and moved on with her case. What happens now? David asked, his voice small and uncertain. Detective Williams sat back in her chair. That depends on a lot of factors. The district attorney will ultimately decide whether to press charges against you, and if so, what those charges will be. What you have in your favor is that you came in voluntarily. You're cooperating fully, and you didn't actually participate in the robbery itself. What works against you is that you were present at the scene. You knowingly associated with individuals who were planning a crime, and you failed to report it to authorities. So I'm going to jail, David said flatly. Maybe. Maybe not. If you're willing to testify against the others, if you can provide information that helps us build our case against the actual perpetrators, the DA might be willing to offer you a deal. Probation, community service, mandatory counseling. But you need to understand that there will be consequences for your actions. You can't just walk away from this like it never happened. David nodded, wiping at his tears. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll testify, I'll cooperate, I'll do community service. I just want a chance to make things right. Detective Williams turned to Marcus. What about you? Are you going to support your brother through this process? Because he's going to need someone to hold him accountable, to keep him on the right path. The system can give him a second chance, but he has to earn it. I'll be there, Marcus said without hesitation. I'm stationed across the country, but I'll make it work. I'll check in regularly. I'll help him find resources and opportunities, and I'll make sure he stays out of trouble. He's my brother. I'm not giving up on him. The interview continued for another hour, with Detective Williams asking detailed questions about the robbery and the individuals involved. David answered everything honestly, holding nothing back. It was painful to watch him relive his mistakes, to see the shame and regret on his face as he described his poor judgment and cowardice. But Marcus was also proud of him. This was the hardest thing David had ever done, and he was doing it with courage and honesty. Finally, Detective Williams turned off the recorder and stood up. All right, David, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to take all of this information to the district attorney. Based on your cooperation and the circumstances, I'm going to recommend that you be charged with accessory after the fact, rather than armed robbery. That's still a serious charge, but it's significantly less severe. In the meantime, you're free to go, but you cannot leave the state, and you need to check in with me every week. If you disappear or if you contact any of the other suspects, the deal is off and you'll be arrested immediately.
Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am, David said.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving me a chance. They left the interview room and rejoined Gloria in the waiting area. She stood up immediately, her eyes searching David's face for any indication of how things had gone. Marcus gave her a reassuring nod. He did great, Mom, Marcus said. He told the truth and Detective Williams is going to help him. Gloria pulled David into a tight embrace, her tears flowing freely now. I'm so proud of you, baby. I'm so proud of you for doing the right thing. As they walked out of the police station into the bright morning sunlight, Marcus felt some of the tension leave his body. This wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. David still faced potential criminal charges and the road ahead would be difficult. But at least now there was hope. At least now David had a chance to turn his life around. They drove home in relative silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Marcus thought about Detective Williams and her story, about how she had faced adversity and discrimination but had kept pushing forward. He thought about the encounter he'd had with Officers Dawson and Miller, about how different that had been from this morning's experience. It was a reminder that not all police officers were the same. They,